Okay. Hi there. What's your name today? LP? Nice to meet you. What do you do? That's right. I told you not to. All right. So I'm just for free issues. So we own Sedona, and it goes in twice. West, southwest. That's me. Yeah. Who did it? Okay. So which school did you go to? Oh, did you? Okay. So the environmental study, Son and I worked with Bill Blue to put the trail back there. Halfway to the school going. There's one side had a house that was under construction at one time. The other thing that's kind of related to trees. The one in trees was
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's great to see everybody out here at the Botanical Garden. Pretty incredible piece of property here in Phoenix. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. This morning, Secretary Vilsack, Forest Service Chief Moore, and I and Congressman O'Halloran will be discussing an important announcement concerning the future of our forests in Arizona and across the West. I want to first extend my thanks to the Secretary and to Chief Moore for traveling to our beautiful state. I also want to thank the mayors and county officials and conservation advocates and many others for attending today. Over the past 2 decades or more, wildfires have devastated Arizona's forests and rural communities. Now, fire has always been a natural part of forest ecosystems, but the mega fires that we've been experiencing are like anything we've seen before. Today's fires, they burn hotter and they burn longer, and they can easily reach temperatures in the thousands of degrees. They scar the landscape, and that can take years to recover, and we know that they're also deadly. And these fires often push our fire services and our first responders to the brink. Our firefighters that are on the front lines of this crisis have told me time and time again that it is hard. It is so challenging. Every summer, they're battling intense blazes in grueling and in sometimes deadly conditions. It's why I will never forget the ultimate sacrifice that Arizona firefighters, the 19 crew members of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, who paid the ultimate price, doing their jobs, serving the state of Arizona. And this June marks the 20th anniversary of the 468,000-acre rodeo Chudeskai fire, in which thousands of residents were evacuated. And 10 years later, eastern Arizona was hit again by the Wildfire. At 538,000 acres, it holds the record as the largest fire in state history. The 2002 Rodeo and Chudeskai fires and the 2011 Wildfire have collectively destroyed over 1 million acres in the Apache Stick Graves National Forest. The threat to human life, the property damage, and the environmental damage from these fires last long. And it takes so long to put these fires out. Often the land is scorched and can't absorb water. All it takes is for one good monsoon season to turn a burn area into a channel for deadly flash floods. Last summer, post-fire floods tore through Miami Globe. Ranchers were forced to leave behind horses and cattle, had to leave their ranches. And last summer, we saw floods in Flagstaff neighborhoods in the wake of the 2019 museum fire. That's why the USDA's announcement today, committing additional federal resources towards flood mitigation projects in Coconino County, is so critical. So thank you, Secretary Vilsack. Thank you, Chief Moore. I hope we can build more partnerships like this across the state. Wildfires in the United States have reached a crisis level. The truth is that drought and climate change will only deepen this crisis. It's why I prioritize wildfire preparedness in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was signed into law in November. I was part of a core group of senators who worked to make historic investments in our nation's roads, bridges, ports of entry, and water infrastructure. Every year, millions of people hike, camp, and hunt in our national forests. Our forests support watersheds that funnel rain and snow melt into rivers and reservoirs that provide Arizonans with water for drinking and farming. Managed, healthy forests become resilient to extreme wildfire behavior, which makes our rural communities safer and our drinking water cleaner. Our bipartisan infrastructure bill allocates resources to help Arizona and our nation to get ahead of this crisis. It contains funding to accelerate work under the Forest Restoration Initiative, also known as FORFRI, and to stand up a wood products and biomass industry in our state. It includes grants to help Arizona communities and homeowners build defensible space. It supports more hiring and higher pay for wildland firefighters. And it establishes a commission of wildfire experts to evaluate and develop new strategies for fighting and preventing wildfires, an initiative that Senator Romney and I worked on together. We can't keep doing the same thing under worse conditions and expect a better result. That's not going to happen. We need to be more proactive. We can't afford to have a fire or flood on Bill Williams Mountain. This is going to wipe out the city of Williams. Unmanaged fire in the Cragon Reservoir area may result in Payson, Arizona, losing its municipal water supply. And we will start by utilizing the resources under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I look forward to hearing from Secretary Vilsack and Chief Moore about how these resources will support new plans to protect our state from wildfires. And I appreciate their attention to this issue because it has such an impact on our state. So with that, thank you again to Chief Moore. Thank you to Congressman O'Halloran. And let me turn it over to Secretary Vilsack. Thank you.
Senator Kelly, thank you very much for the invitation to come to your great state. And Representative O'Halloran, thank you so much as well for steadfast advocacy on behalf of the folks of Arizona for more resources, especially for fire. Incredibly important group of forests that require significant attention. You folks are very fortunate to have these two individuals who have been fighting incredibly hard for the resources and the direction that will allow us to begin the process of doing a better job of maintaining and managing our forests. And it's an issue that I know pretty well. I was secretary for 8 years and had the opportunity to come out to areas that were either in the midst of a fire or were recovering from a fire, including here in Arizona. And I understand and appreciate the cost of the forest fires. I've seen the exhausted look of firefighters who just can't get ahead of a fire that is out of control. I've seen and tried to console those whose homes have been destroyed, those whose businesses have been disrupted. I understand the pain that a fire can create. And I understand the aftermath of the fire. The fact that once a fire is finally put out, that is just the beginning of the challenges that a community faces. The need for restoration to avoid the flooding risk that Senator Kelly wisely pointed out. And I think it's fair to say that anyone in the West, anyone who understands and appreciates the role that our forests play, not only as recreational opportunities, not only as woody biomass opportunities, not only as incredible sinks for carbon, but just the majestic areas that they represent. I think it's fair to say that people who know the forest know that the time to act for significant improvement, to change the trajectory of our wildfires and its impact on people, communities, forests, and on firefighters is actually long overdue. And I will tell you that we worked hard for many, many years in the traditional budgeting process to try to get the resources that would allow us to begin aggressively treating many of these areas. I mean, the reality is the science is pretty clear. The science tells us that if we take preventative steps, if we do a little treatment, if we thin out, do a little prescribed burning, we can actually significantly reduce the risk of a fire once it starts. Look, we're not going to stop fires. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of lightning strikes every single year. And tragically and unfortunately, there are also some careless folks from year to year. But what we can do is begin the process of reducing the catastrophic nature of these fires. So, in order to do that, it's fair to say that the Forest Service has recognized for some time the need to dramatically increase, and I emphasize the word dramatic, increase our ability to treat at a pace and scale that will actually make a difference. And so today we launch a 10-year strategic plan, a plan that's based on an understanding of the need to put resources behind this effort. This forest chief I'm going to introduce in a few minutes has had the difficult job as a member of the Forest Service from year to year of recognizing what could be done but not having the resources to do it, or in the year that maybe resources might have been available to use, he had to transfer those resources from preventing the fire to putting the fire out. And he saw the creep, the budget creep, from year to year in terms of fire fighting, taking 30% of the budget, taking 40% of the budget, that in some years taking as much as 50 to 60% of the budget. And folks wonder, why can't we stop this? Why can't we improve recreational? Why can't we see trails? It's in large part because of this budget creep, the cost of firefighting. So today with this plan, the Forest Service commits to an aggressive effort to treat 20 million acres of Forest Service land at levels over and above what we have been doing before. This is not taking advantage of what we've already done or already are doing. It's increasing by 20 million acres, our commitment over the next 10 years, and assisting in an additional 30 million acres of land that may be state, tribal, or privately owned. So a plan to essentially treat 50 million additional acres. Work that needs to be done based on the best available science. And it's a commitment to utilize that science in determining where and how. Now, the reality is the Forest Service can't do this alone. We obviously can work on our 20 million acres, but we have to work with our federal partner, Department of Interior, who is also committed to this effort. We'll need to work with the state of Arizona and other western states and states across the United States where there is risk of fire. We need to recognize the nation-to-nation responsibilities we have to consult with and work closely with tribes. And of course, private forest owners are an incredibly important partner who understand the risk to their business as a result of fire. We'll need to work with these folks to identify the areas of highest risk and put resources immediately to work in those priority areas. I think it's fair to say that we've already, in a sense, identified large-scale priority areas. We know that the Pacific Northwest is an area of attention. We know that Sierra Nevada Range in California is an area of attention. We know that there are forests on the Front Range in Colorado that are of attention, and we also understand and appreciate the forests here in Arizona and in the Southwest need our attention. Senator Kelly's work on that bipartisan infrastructure bill is making this day possible. Let's make sure people understand the importance of that infrastructure bill. Because we can't do this under the regular budgeting process. There just simply is not the resources being developed and allocated to the Forest Service to do everything we want to do. So we needed a jump start. We needed extra resources. We needed an extra commitment. We needed a recognition by our Congress and by our leaders in Congress that the forests are infrastructure. And in this bill, over $6 billion was dedicated to the Department of Agriculture for a variety of purposes to the Forest Service. About $2.85 billion is committed to work in this area, with at least half of that amount being dedicated to treatment. Just to give you a sense of this and the magnitude and the importance of this. Traditionally and historically, we spend about $230 million a year putting nickels and dimes together to do the treatment that is being done and that we know and we've seen. And recent fires, I'm thinking of the South Tahoe. The preventative work that was done there saved that community. So we know it works, but we've done $240 million of work every year. With the funding that Senator Kelly, Representative O'Halloran, and others have put in this infrastructure bill, we now will be able to do, for the next 5 years, around $650 million of additional work. So that's a 350% increase in the level of commitment just on the treatment side. There will be additional money for restoration, additional money to make sure that we do what we have to do in terms of reforestation. So this is a significant opportunity for us. In addition to our work, the bill also provides over $1.5 billion that will be allocated through the Forest Service to our state and private forest partners for similar work. So you can see there's a significant commitment here of resources above and beyond the traditional budget resources. And in the budget, we've also asked for additional resources, and hope at some point in time that gets finished. But in the meantime, $650 million, 350% increase in our treatment resources allows us now to really focus on the right place with your help and assistance, the right size of projects, right treatment in order to get the right results, which is beginning the process of reducing the risk of catastrophic wildfire and making our forests more resilient, more fire adaptive ecosystem, and certainly a healthier ecosystem. Now this 10-year plan and this 10-year commitment that the Forest Service is making, it's a pledge, it's a promise to the people of Arizona, the people of the Southwest, and the people of the Western U.S. in particular, that we're really going to take seriously with these resources and hopefully additional resources that may be forthcoming, our responsibility to be a better partner. But there has to be communication and engagement. That's a set of values that will drive this plan. We understand the necessity of working across boundaries and borders, county borders, state borders. Not significant here, the partnerships have to be firm at each level in order for the work to be done most efficiently. And candidly, there has been a time and a place in the recent past, or lots of recent past rather, where the Forest Service and other aspects of USDA may have not paid as much attention to underserved communities as perhaps we should have. And that's not going to be the case with this plan. There is a commitment to making sure that historically underserved communities are not left out of the work that's being done and not left out of the risk reduction potential for this. Now the first steps in this process, and perhaps Chief Moore will go into greater detail on this, will be the USDA and the Forest Service working collaboratively and closely with the Department of Interior to begin the process of reaching out and making sure that our focus and our understanding of where priority areas are matches up to what folks feel and think at the local level. Again, to identify those high-risk fire sheds. And as soon as they're identified, beginning work this year, in calendar year 2022, to take these resources and get them to work as quickly as possible to reducing the risk. So this is not a situation where we're going to wait a couple of years from now. You're going to see the impact. You're going to see the impact in 2022. We're going to look for landscape scale projects, and we're going to begin treatment. We're going to solicit input consistently over the course of this 10-year effort from local folks to allow us to also identify where the priority areas need to be in 2023 and 2024 and 2025. And we're going to develop a system for tracking and evaluating our work. Now, Chief, you may not understand this, but here's a pledge I'm going to make. Because I'm making it right now publicly, you're going to have to follow. Merle, you get this? It's one thing to track and evaluate and tell me how things are going. And it may be that you can tell Senator Kelly, Representative Allen when they ask, when they write a letter. But that's not good enough. We've got to create a structure and a system that allows that testing and evaluation and that information to be available to folks right out here. We need to make it public. We need to hold ourselves accountable, right? So everybody knows where the money went, what it was for, where the treatments were done, and occasionally maybe a good news story when there was a fire, how that fire was contained, because we did the treatment that allowed that fire to come to ground, that allowed it to be put out quickly without risking communities like property. So that's the commitment of the Forest Service and the Secretary of Agriculture to make the outcomes of this effort helpful. Now, I know that there's interest in 4-Fry, and I realize and appreciate that this has been a long conversation. I'm the first secretary in the history of the Department of Agriculture that came back to the job that he once had. Now, when you do that, you assume that all of the issues you had dealt with before have been resolved and dealt with. When you come back and find out that's not the case, you're not very happy about it. I think the chief can attest to the fact that I was pretty hot about this issue. But I'm pleased to know that with the chief's work and the work of the senator and representative and you all, we're going to begin aggressively promoting this effort for 4-Fry with at least $54 million being dedicated this year alone to high priority areas, the highest priority areas in the 4-Fry area. And we're also going to commit, as the senator indicated, to specific issues. For example, the museum fire, we're looking at a sediment reduction project using our Good Neighbor Authority with the state. The Forest Service committing $3.5 million to that effort. We have a partnership with NRCS, our sister agency in the USDA that's also equally concerned about soil health and water quality. They're committing an additional $3.5 million, so $7 million going into that effort. We're going to work on the Flagstaff Watershed Protection Project in a couple of watersheds and use some resources there. We're going to work on the, I hope I get this right, the Cragen Watershed Protection Project with about over 7,500 acres of work and a portion of the $54 million that I mentioned earlier is going to be utilized for that project. So the commitments are there, the projects are there, the resources are there thanks to the recovery, or to the Infrastructure Act. Let me just simply wrap up and introduce Chief Moore by saying that a portion of the resources in the infrastructure bill also focus on the need for supporting our firefighters. Now, maybe some of you in your public lives, here as public officials, you've had this opportunity. And I know the chief has had it. I suspect that the senator and Representative had it as well. But one of the responsibilities of the Secretary of Agriculture is when we lose a firefighter, to reach out to the family. And I had the opportunity early in the year, last year, to do that again. I've done it several times before. The Secretary obviously also did it when he was governor of our national electives. It's by far the toughest job that any elected official has. Because, you know, it's pretty tough to say to a young widow, really appreciate the service of your husband. Gave his life in a worthy cause. All of that, true. But it doesn't bring it back. It doesn't ease the pain of loss. I had this incredible woman I was speaking to. She thanked me for the call, and she said, would it be okay with you, Mr. Secretary, if I talked a little bit about these temporary firefighters? These guys you call temporary firefighters, and the conditions that they're working. Because she said, I'm not sure you know. You may not know that they make very little money. You may not know that they're required to travel from fireplace to fireplace without any decent housing. And you may be shocked to find out, Mr. Secretary, that they actually live in their cars. They live in their cars while they're fighting this fire. They're risking their lives every single day. And they're living in the car, in their cars, every hard life every day. So I thanked Michelle for her candidness. I committed to her that we would begin the process of working to improve conditions. The President became aware of this, and he was shocked, as I was, to find out that we weren't even paying some of these firefighters a minimum of $15 an hour, which I would say is not enough. But the President directed us to begin this process, and again, with the help of the elected officials who are here, you all put resources behind this bill that allows us to do a couple of things. One, transition these temporary guys to full-time status, which means a really big deal. Increasing the pay and developing a classification that treats these folks at a place and at a range and a commitment from us, the public, that is commensurate with the risks that they ask, that we ask them about to take. I happen to have a nephew who's in Park Service, and during fire season, he works for the Park Service, and he's a Marine, and he gets his buddies who served together in Afghanistan who are out here in Arizona, feel really strongly about this, folks. The people who serve the public, they take a lot of criticism. Sometimes it's legitimate. But I will tell you, the people that work for the Forest Service, people that work at USDA, they are genuinely committed to their work and to the task at hand. They love the forest. They love the forest. They love every aspect of the job. And it's important and necessary for us to make sure that we adequately acknowledge the work that they do. Now, I will tell you that we also address the housing issue through some of these temporary guys. We work from Airbnb and trying to find places for them to stay. So I appreciate very much, Senator, and I really, really appreciate you all putting resources in, not just to fix up the forest, but also recognize the people who are putting their lives at risk when fire does occur. Kudos to both of you for doing that. One guy who was dedicated his life to the forest, who understands and appreciates the challenges, budget challenges, the personnel challenges that are faced every single day, but is committed to this 10-year effort, is committed to the 4-Fry effort, is committed to healthier, more resilient forests. Is our forest chief. Ready?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Senator Kelly. Thank you all for just your leadership on this issue. Today is a good day. It's a really good day. Today, I'm excited to announce this strategy that will focus the Forest Service and our partners on protecting at-risk communities while improving forest resilience. A combination of overgrown forests, a warming climate, and a broad number of homes in wildland-urban interface areas, followed by a century of rigorous fire suppression, have contributed to what is now a full-blown wildfire and forest health crisis, and as a result, a call to action. Today, we launched a 10-year strategy to squarely address this wildfire epidemic in the places where it poses the most immediate threats. This strategy is called Combating the Wildfire Crisis. It's a new strategy for protecting communities and improving resilience in America's forests. This strategy aligns with the historic once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity to work with partners to focus fuels and forest health treatments more strategically and in the right places at the right scale. As the Secretary had indicated, we currently treat about 2 million acres a year of national forest. This wildfire crisis is designed to do 3 things. One, as he said, is to treat 20 million Forest Service acres in the West. 2 is to treat an additional up to 30 million acres of other federal, state, private, and tribal lands in the West. And then 3rd is to develop a plan for long-term maintenance beyond the 10 years. You know, we talk about making an investment over the next 10 years, but we have to also equally talk about maintaining that investment that we've created during this time in our lives. We'll treat the highest priority fire sheds, you know, which are those most capable of generating large wildfire disasters, but also have the highest probability of improving conditions in the fire-prone areas of the West. The initial investment, and I say this twice, the initial investment in this new strategy will begin in areas that our scientists have identified as high risk for community exposure based on historic fire behavior. Now, these areas will include, as the Secretary also mentioned, the Pacific Northwest, the Sierra Nevada range in California, the Southwest here, and also the Front Range of Colorado. And I'll say it for the 3rd time, these are the initial investment. We're looking at years 1 through 2, and in this 10-year plan, we're also looking at years 3 through 7. And so we'll be constantly evaluating additional projects to be a part of this effort that we're talking about here today. You know, in the past decades, and I think ever since the first National Fire Plan in 2000, we've made a lot of advances in collaboration. We've increased funding to work to reduce wildfire risk. We've aligned actions and partners across landship boundaries, and we've created a collaborative structure that will build on our partnership to match the scale of work to the scale of the wildfire risk. We're ready to begin the work in a way that meets the urgency of the moment. By working with key partners and stakeholders, we will increase the pace and scale of forest health treatments across shared landscapes. The strategy emphasizes a dramatic increase in the scope and scale of forest health treatments and restored a natural role of low-intensity fires. We'll be looking at large-scale thinning projects, and again, those large-scale thinning projects are really aimed at looking at how the low-intensity fires move across a fire-adapted landscape. The Secretary talked about, we're not talking about stopping fires, but we're talking about having that fire behave as it does its natural thing, move across the landscape. By working with key partners and stakeholders, we'll carry out our wildfire crisis strategy by building a large coalition to increase the scale and fuels and the forest health treatments across shared landscapes. We have a comprehensive plan for engaging key partners and stakeholders at the right time and in the right way to help the Forest Service execute these important actions under the 10-year framework. The strategy brings together tribes, partners, states, and communities to work across all boundaries. Here in Arizona, as an example, we met earlier this morning and we talked about the partnership and the collaboration that exists here in the state. When we talk about the collective community coming together to achieve success, there's no greater example anywhere in the country than what we have here in Arizona and this part of the world that's happening today. So our goal, of course, is to build on that. I've seen from the Governor's Office to the National Wild Turkey Foundation to the National Forest Foundation, from the Nature Conservancy to the Arizona Department of Game and Fish to the Navajo Nation and to also the Arizona Corporation Commission. And it demonstrates again that we must all come together to achieve results. In the end, our goal is to build and grow on existing collaboratives that are in place. We are deeply grateful to the staunch coalition of partners who are supporting this work, and we look forward to expanding these coalitions to get this work done. And lastly, I just want to say thank you all for being here. It's another example of how, again, this collective community of people come together to solve problems that are affecting the communities that they live in. So now I will turn this over to Michiko Martin, who is the Regional Forester for the Southwest.